The complete works of Swami Vivekananda, The Vedanta, lecture delivered by Swami Vivekananda at Lahore in 1897, Part 3. To go back to our preliminaries, there are first two things to be understood. One, the psychological aspect common to all the Vedantic schools, and the other, the cosmological aspect. I will first take up the latter. Today we find wonderful discoveries of modern science coming upon us like bolts from the blue, opening our eyes to marvels we never dreamt of. But many of these are only rediscoveries of what had been found ages ago. It was only the other day that modern science found that even in the midst of the variety of forces there is unity. It has just discovered that what it calls heat, magnetism, electricity, and so forth are all convertible into one unit force, and as such it expresses all these by one name, whatever you may choose to call it. But this has been done even in the Samahita, old and ancient as it is. In it we meet with this very idea of force I was referring to. All the forces, whether you call them gravitation or attraction or repulsion, whether expressing themselves as heat or electricity or magnetism, are nothing but the variations of that unit energy. Whether they express themselves as thought reflected from Antahkarna, the inner organs of man, or as action from an external organ, the unit from which they spring is what is called prana. Again, what is prana? Prana is spandan or vibration. When all this universe shall have resolved back into its primal state, what becomes of this infinite force? Do they think that it becomes extinct? Of course not. If it become extinct, what would be the course of the next wave? Because the motion is going in wave forms, rising, falling, rising again, falling again. Here is the word Srishti, which expresses the universe. Mark that the word does not mean creation. I am helpless in talking English. I have to translate the Sanskrit words as best as I can. It is Srishti, projection. At the end of a cycle, everything becomes finer and finer and is resolved back into the primal state from which it sprang. And there it remains for a time, quiescent, ready to spring forth again. That is Srishti, projection. And what becomes of all these forces, the pranas? They are resolved back into the primal prana, and this prana becomes almost motionless, not entirely motionless, and that is what is described in the Vedic Sutra. It vibrated without vibrations. Anidavatam. There are many technical phrases in the Upanishads difficult to understand. For instance, take this word vata. Many times it means air and many times motion. And often people confuse one with the other. We must guard against that. And what becomes of what you call matter? The forces permeate all matter. They all dissolve into Akasha, from which they come out again. This Akasha is the primal matter. Whether you translate it as ether or anything else, the idea is that this Akasha is a primal form of matter. This Akasha vibrates under the action of prana, and when the next Srishti is coming up, as the vibration becomes quicker, the Akasha is lashed into all these wave forms, which we call suns, moons, and systems. We read again, everything in this universe has been projected, prana vibrating. You must mark the word ijati because it comes from ija, to vibrate. Nihi sritam, projected. Yadidam kincha, whatever is this universe. This is a part of the cosmological side. There are many details working into it. For instance, how the process takes place, how there is first ether, and how from the ether comes other things, how that becomes ether begins to vibrate, and from that vayu comes. But the one idea is here, that is from the finer that then the grosser has come. Gross matter is the last to emerge and the most external. And this gross matter has had the finer matter before it. Yet, we see that the whole thing has been resolved into two. But there is not yet a final unity. There is the unity of force. Prana, there is the unity of matter called Akasha. Is there any unity to be found among them again? Can they be melted into one? Our modern science is mute here. It has not yet found its way out. And if it is doing so, just as it has been slowly finding the same old prana and the same ancient aksha, it will have to move along the same lines. The next unity is the omnipresent impersonal being known as by its old mythological name as Brahma. The four-headed Brahma and psychologically called Mahat. This is where the two unite. What is called your mind is only a bit of this Mahat caught in the trap of the brain. And the sum total of all the minds caught in the meshes of brains is what you call Samashti, the aggregate, the universal. Analysis had to go further. It was not yet complete. Here we were, each and every one of us, as it were, a microcosm, and the world taken together is the macrocosm. But whatever is in the vyashti, the particular, we may safely conjecture that a similar thing is happening also outside. If we had the power to analyze our own minds, we might safely conjecture that the same thing is happening in the cosmic mind. What is this mind is the question. In modern times, only finer. The body is gross, and behind the body is what we call Suksham Sharira, the fine body or mind. This is also material, only finer, and it is not the Atma. I will not translate this word to you in English because the idea does not exist in Europe. It is untranslatable. The modern attempt of German philosophers is to translate the word Atman by the word self. And until that word is universally accepted, it is impossible to use it. So call it as self or anything, it is our Atman. This Atman is the real man behind. It is the Atman that uses the material mind as its instrument, its antakarna, as its psychological term for the mind. And the mind, by means of a series of internal organs, works the visible organs of the body. What is this mind? It was only the other day that the Western philosophers have come to know that the eyes are not the real organs of vision, but that behind there are other organs, the indriyas. And if these are destroyed, a man may have 1,000 eyes like Indra, but there will be no sight for him. Your philosophy starts with this assumption that by vision is not meant the external vision. The real vision belongs to the internal organs, the brain centers inside. You may call them what you like, but it is not that indriyas are the eyes or the nose or the ears. And the sum total of all these, indriyas plus the manas, buddhi, chitta, ahamkara, etc., is what is called the mind. And if the modern psychologist comes to tell you that the brain is what is called the mind, and that the brain is formed of so many organs, you need not be afraid at all. Tell him that your philosophers knew it always. It is one of the very first principles of your religion. Well then, we have to understand now what is meant by manas, buddhi, chitta, ahamkar, etc. First of all, let us take chitta. It is the mind stuff, a part of that generic mind for itself.